be 6 papers to be presented. Okay, so each paper has 20 minutes for presentation and 10 minutes for Q&A. Anyone may ask questions, but use the Q&A tab at the Zoom panel. Please identify yourself when you ask a question. Okay, attendees may also upvote questions by clicking the thumbs up. Right, so let's proceed to the first paper. Our first paper comes from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and the University of the Philippines, Manila, and the Philippine Genome Center. Entitled Weighted Protein to Protein Interactions in HER2 Positive Breast Cancer, authored by Jean Malolos, Pia Regina, Fatima Zamora, Joshua Dizon, Henry Adorna, and Alexander Yang. Let's welcome Jean Malolos to present the paper on behalf of the group. Jean, you may now share your screen.
All right, good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Jean, good morning.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. So here again is our study, weighted protein-protein interactions in HER2-positive breast cancer. So as an acknowledgement, we would like to acknowledge that this exploratory study was a product of the Philippine Genome Center Course for Bioinformatics in view, bioinformatics training and internship program last November to December 2019, where Sir Dizon was our mentor from PGC, and Dr. Adorna and Dr. Young were our advisors. So here's the outline for this presentation. So when abnormal cell growth starts in breast cells, usually in the duct, it generally leads to breast cancer. So breast cancer mainly affects women with 2.1 million cases per year. And although uncommon, men can get breast cancer too. In 2018, the World Health Organization reported that 627,000 died, having a cancer fatality rate of 15%. So there are 4 molecular subtypes of breast cancer, and as follows: luminal A, which has a substantial number of hormone receptors, but has little to no human epidermal growth factor receptor 2, HER2. And then HER2 positive, luminal B, which has a substantial number of hormone receptors and HER2. And lastly, the triple negative, which has little to no hormone receptors or estrogen or progesterone and HER2. So these subtypes have implications in the treatment plan of the patient. So I must have mentioned HER2 earlier. So let's discuss it. So human epidermal growth factor receptor 2, so that's HER2, is a tyrosine kinase transmembrane receptor that belongs to the epidermal growth factor receptor family. So that's EGFR. It's the HER2 is a growth promoting protein in the epidermis. So in a way, there's this constant crosstalk or communication between HER2 positive signaling pathway and other pathways responsible for cell proliferation. So that's the rapid increase in growth of cells and survival, such as Notch pathway, estrogen receptor signaling pathway, and intrinsic and extrinsic pathways of apoptosis. So thus, any perturbation in one pathway also affects other pathways in the crosstalk. So here's an example of the estrogen receptor signaling pathway, the WNT. So an analysis of these crosstalks may lead to the identification of novel proteins involved in breast cancer pathophysiology. So these proteins may be novel therapeutic targets for breast cancer. So we now go to protein interaction networks. So in a sense, the previous receptors mentioned are proteins. So a network of highly established interaction of proteins are in the protein interaction networks, and there are databases such as HINT and Senior that curate the interactions of proteins to proteins or proteins to other small molecules, and vice versa. So ERB or ER2 signaling pathway is a protein interaction network. With the data of protein interaction networks, it would somehow generate a network with this. In this context, we explored how the concept of dominating sets entities in the network. So a dominating set is a subset of vertices. You may see here in the image as the ones highlighted here. So there's a subset of vertices that connects to all vertices. So this has been applied to studies in protein-protein interaction networks. So some of these are the minimum dominating set-based methods for analyzing biological networks. So they used minimum dominating sets with the HINT database. Their network is unweighted and undirected protein-protein interaction network. And then another study used the minimum connected dominating set, where they use again HINT database. Their network is unweighted and undirected protein-protein interaction network. So, and then another is a directed minimum connected dominating set. So they use the senior data set, and their network is unweighted directed PPI network. So they use regulation as directionality. So let me go back here. So this study by Briones et al. Explored the directionality of the interaction, whether a certain protein A increases the levels of protein B or decreases it. So in this study, we retained the directionality and also added weights. Also added weights. Hold on. So we retained the directionality and the weights were used, and we aim to analyze weighted protein-protein interaction in ER2 breast cancer. So we aim to analyze the minimum connected dominating set generated from the weighted protein interaction network and assess the generated minimum connected dominating set with the weighted network and the minimum connected dominating set in the unweighted network. So in our methods, this is generally the workflow that we followed. So first, we established a protein co-expression network by using protein expression levels of breast cancer tissue available in the TGCA database. Then we computed the Pearson correlation coefficient for each pair to come with a correlation network. This correlation network served as the weights of protein interactions. Next, we somehow overlap the correlation with the senior database. So from that computation, we overlapped it with the data set that we had in senior. So then we use the MLST, so the maximum leaf spanning tree algorithm. I'll show it later on the overlap networks to generate a MCDS, a minimum connected dominating set of the proteins. Lastly, we assess the biological soundness of the resulting weighted and unweighted networks by looking at the proteins involved. So We got our data from the Cancer Genome Atlas Network, the comprehensive molecular portraits of human breast tumors. And the reverse phase protein array dataset had 403 breast cancer tissue samples, which detected expression levels of 165 cancer-related proteins and phosphoproteins. So out of the 403 samples, 52 were HER2 positive or HER2 and these were included in the analysis. So we just used the person correlation coefficient. We computed that to get the expression levels of each protein pair. And then we applied the MLST algorithm to generate the minimum connected dominating set of the data sets that we have. So after we overlap the data from the protein co-expression network. So for protein pairs not found in the protein co-expression network, we set the edge weight of 0. So here's the algorithm for the weighted maximum spanning tree algorithm. So let me just show what happens in the initial part of the algorithm. So in the data set that we had, ER2, ERDD2 is our starting node. So we chose ER2 as the starting node, and then with the algorithm, it chooses the the next node or the next protein with the highest value of weight. So here it shows EGFR. So that's from our result. So this is the path of unregulated proteins. So the next node after EGFR is the ESR1, as it has the highest edge with edge weight connected to EGFR. So so that's it for what we did. So here's our results. So here's the pairwise correlation values that we had. Excuse me. So and then for the co-expression network, we had 165 nodes, and so it generated 13,530 edges. I'm sorry. And then here's our senior data network. It has 5,721 uh 23,022 edges. So it's this very large network. So here's our generated MCDS, minimum connected dominating set, from the algorithm that we used. So here's a comparison between the data set of the unweighted senior PTI and the protein interaction network with the one that we overlap the co-expression levels. So you can see here, hold on. You can see here that the nodes for the unweighted or the generated nodes for the unweighted and weighted somehow differ, diba? And same with the edges. So we have more found interactions or connections in the weighted senior TTI and more nodes. Right. So here's the no well now that we've generated the SDS of both networks, we want to assess if the included proteins are relevant to breast cancer pathology. So the pathways involving the said proteins do not encompass the major signaling pathways in breast cancer, validating the appropriateness of the generated MCDS network in this analysis. So based on the analysis of the first neighbors, the first neighbors of ERBB2 or ER2, of the unweighted here in the left and the weighted here in the right. So the MCDS path appears to track a biologically relevant pathway for HER2 positive breast cancer. So in this illustration, we involve the proteins do not seem to differ substantially in number, but the weighted MCDS network here, there are paths that are highlighted, as you see here, which may lead us to think that there's significance in breast cancer pathology over all the connections. So the entire MCDS weighted network here needs to be validated to determine, if needed, the algorithm is able to accurately map other signaling pathways um, in crosstalk with HER2 signaling pathway. So, in conclusion, having analyzed the weighted and unweighted MCDS generated by the algorithm, we can say that edge weights have the potential to refine the MCDS search for biologically relevant pathways. So we can see, as we saw earlier, I mean, that there's uh, a difference with adding weights weights in the system, in the database. So for further recommendations for future studies, to use protein expression datasets that will cover the entire senior network or any online resources and compare the NCDS generated using protein expression levels from tissues of other molecular subtypes and explore different edge thresholds or the sum of edge weights that will aid the algorithm in choosing the next node to pass through. So here are references and thank you for listening and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you, Jean. That was a very interesting work. So it's a big team. Is this the entire team?
These are the interns of the training that we had. So here's me and Dr. Pia, and these are our co-interns, and they're working on other projects as well at that time.
So the team is made up of guys from the Philippine Genome Center, and then I would assume from UP Manila they are physicians or medical
Um,
researchers.
Dr. Zamora was also part of the internship. I mean, she's an intern. So I think
Ah,
we are from different universities and different institutions.
Ang ganda. So, was the specific choice on HER2 positive, parang was it a parang intentional decision na ito yung gusto namin hanapin? Gusto niyong hanapin? Or it just
Ano
turned
una,
out during the experiments na, pwede pala yung approach namin for HER2 positive?
una po we tried different different pathway. Pero mas nag-make sense nga po for looking into ER2 muna. Kasi since there's a previous study by sila Uni, Briones et al.
Mm-hmm.
Using the ER2 signaling pathway as well.
Mm-hmm. Would the same weighted edge approach work for the other breast cancer subtypes?
I think it would,
Mm-hmm.
but we still need some data to see that.
Mm-hmm. And for other cancers as well, right?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay. The floor is now open for questions. Baka I hug the entire Q&A part. So you tried actually different experiments before you ended with this type of interactions to be considered as weights for the edges, right? So I
Yes,
just want
but
to,
I think you
I was
replied.
just thinking, parang, was it a discovery approach or was it a, you tried and tested specific interactions para makita nyo which one would work?
Uh, we used Urdu na lang din po when we tried the implementation. uh, because it's well documented na yun.
Yeah. I think
From the PCSC
mm,
database, mas marami po
Very,
yung data on breast cancer.
yeah, I think
Sorry, I
Pia
think there's
wanted to speak. One of the co-authors wants to say something. Wait lang ah. I need to turn on her
I'm
mic.
putting here already.
Hi. Thank you
Yeah,
very
there,
much.
Pia.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Chang and Professor Adorna. So basically, we used ER2 because it is well documented. So in this case, we just want to know if the algorithm works in a well documented network. So in that case, we will have no problems with the annotations
I
of
see.
genes. Yes. So the question on whether or not it will work on other breast cancer types,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we don't know. We didn't check it. That's why we used ER2 because of the four subtypes, it's the most studied.
Okay. And for other cancers, would that work also? Do you think?
For the algorithm, or for the
Yes.
protein.
For the
Okay.
algorithm.
Yeah. So for the algorithm, so we just in this case we used co-expression networks specific for breast cancer. But if we have the data set for co-expression networks of other cancers, we can use the same algorithm and validate it as well.
Mm,
That yes.
okay. So the choice actually dependent on which had the most number of data,
Yes.
which had also a lot of annotations.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Other questions from the group?
Gary, I think Alex would like to say something.
Wait, let me
I already
turn on
put
his mic,
panel.
Alex. Is Alex now a panelist?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, one of the Alex
One
Young.
of the
You wanted to say something, Alex?
Yeah, sorry. I misplaced my microphone. Yeah, we intentionally chose HER2 positive breast cancer as a positive control for this work. So,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the most well-validated cancer pathway. Transgenic mice that overexpress HER2 get breast tumors. We have pharmaceutical drugs against HER2 that prolong life in HER2 positive patients. And also it's highly associated with human breast cancers. So from three different directions, it's a highly validated pathway. So if we do our studies on this particular pathway and get positive results, then that gives us more confidence when we choose to study less well mapped out pathways. Because the problem with bioinformatics, computational studies applied to biology is that topological connections don't necessarily translate to biological connections.
I
So
see.
a lot of times we get very intriguing results from other people and from us, but we don't know whether that's by accident or coincidence, whether that's because we want to see what we want to see. So that's why we chose this pathway, because there's a reference for us to always go back to validate the results.
Okay. Okay. So was it an expected result? Like you had this hypothesis and then you just want to see if it would actually work or if it's
Yeah.
really there?
Actually, if you look at Gene's results, it actually makes a lot of sense because the largest weighted edges were all proteins that HER2 immediately connects to. It forms a dimer, the protein. So you'll notice that HER2 forms a heterodimer with EGF receptor, EGF, ERB3, 4, and that's actually shown in Gene's results.
Yeah. That's very interesting, Alex, really. Yeah, Joy, you want to say something, Joyreen? You can turn on your mic.
Yes po. Hello po. Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, Jean. Thank you for your presentation. I'm very interested with your research, and I'm actually interested interested with the running time of the algorithm because the problem model is already an NP-hard problem and your data is using a very large network. So I'm interested.
So what was the running time, Jean? How long did it take you to find those paths and validate them? Was it hours?
No po. It's quite fast naman. But as for the question of Dr. Mente, for Ate Joy, that's for my thesis. So I'm
Mm.
still looking for the running time of both algorithms, the unweighted one and the weighted one.
Okay, I see. So the computation of the efficiency of the algorithm is still part of the future work for your thesis. Sige.
Yes, po.
Thank you.
Of its complexity. Thank you.
Are there other questions? If there are no more questions, thank you to the team. Thank you, Jean, for that very good presentation. And to the team for such an interesting work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so for our second paper, it is again from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Maroon Studios, entitled Some Optimization Solutions for Relief Distribution. It is authored by Jairine Clemente, Olivia Demetria, Perry Go, Dylan Salcedo, and Jesse James Suarez. Let's welcome Jairine Clemente to present the work on behalf of the group.
Hello. Could you confirm if you can already see my screen with the laser pointer?
Yes, Joy.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Joy Clemente, and on behalf of my co-authors, I will be presenting our paper entitled Some Optimization Solutions for Relief Distribution. Actually, this paper presents a system design as well as the underlying algorithms which can be used for relief distribution. This paper also serves as our documentation of a previous hackathon entry for GovHack. But also it's a POC research which could also be used if we would if we'll decide to push through with a future project. So to begin, here's the overview of my presentation. I'll start with some background on humanitarian logistics and some statistics on the damages of disasters. And then for the results, we have item 2, 3 to discuss about number one, the software system design, and then the underlying modeling of the problem, as well as how we solve some of the problems. So we subdivided the problems to 4 different problems. The first problem is the warehouse selection. Second problem is the resource allocation. Third problem that we solved is the delivery assignment. And then lastly, the route optimization. And then for the fourth part, I will show a very quick demo of the software. And then lastly, a summary and some future results. So just to give a short background for the relief distribution. So I'm showing here statistics that is pre-pandemic. So we obtained this statistics before COVID hits. So in the last 10 years, we have 700 million deaths. So of course, it is not this number anymore due to COVID-19. And then we have 1.7 billion lives affected and displaced due to natural disasters. And then it's estimated that we have 1.4 trillion assets and livelihood um, uh, wasted because of natural disasters. So the source of these numbers are from UN and World Bank. And then in the Philippine setting, we have damages due to natural and extreme events and disasters. The source of this data is from the Office of the Civil Defense. And this the release date of this article is just last year. So this is for the Philippine setting. However, we have ways how to deal with natural disasters. In fact, from the review of Philippine government disaster financing for recovery and reconstruction, we have three-point process that starts with relief, and then recovery, and then reconstruction. The area that we are interested with is under the pre-disaster planning, which is relief distribution. So this graph is showing the time versus the resource requirements needed for the three different process. So for the relief, the challenge here is the timeline. So the challenge is the solution needs to be fast. Okay, so this is a fairly new article just last year. We have actually budgets for relief distribution. In fact, March 31, 2020, may allotted na 200 billion for low-income households for those who are affected by crises. So may budget naman. However, the problem is humanitarian relief distribution remains to be highly political, subjective, and inefficient. So it has implications. Sometimes, due to these problems identified, we have inefficient supplies delivered. Sometimes spoilage of goods. Yung spoilage of goods nito are from the Yolanda case, and then expensive rollout of operation, and then slow response. So this is just an article showing that the SWD admits 2.8 million worth of relief goods for Yolanda survivors are spoiled. So the question is, can we transform humanitarian relief distribution services using technology to be able to be data-driven, objective, and optimal? And our proposed solution is actually a software solution, a design and implementation of the relief distribution system that will aid humanitarian relief operations. So for the second part of my presentation, I'll be showing a high-level view of the software system that we developed. So the first diagram here is the system context level, showing the two different users of the system. So what we have here is the relief distribution system, which creates the logistic plan based from optimization solutions. There are two users. One is the administrator, the person who is in charge of the overall relief operation. The administrator provides the initial parameters and setup of the system, and then the administrator can also monitor the status of the operation. Now, based from what the relief distribution system can compute, the ground personnel can receive instructions from the relief distribution system, and the ground personnel can also provide current status and report. Okay? And then zooming in, inside the system, we have several different applications that can be deployed and undeployed. Okay, so inside the relief distribution system, we have a server application and a client application. The server application is in charge of receiving requests and performing computation. It is also connected to different external systems as well, such as population, such as databases from the National Statistic Office, OpenStreetMap, and some APIs available in the Google OR tools. So the client application here displays instructions coming from the server application, and it allows monitoring of the ground personnel. So data coming from the ground personnel, such as its current location, reports, and status, will be coming in from the ground personnel and then will be sent to the server application. Right? So we also have a local database which stores the data with population, geographical data, such as the lat long of the warehouses, and then the road networks. Okay, so just we used a simple entity relationship diagram just to model the data. So we tried as much as possible to limit the data because we haven't contacted and we haven't had any partnership with any LGUs before. So we tried to be as general as possible. So in the model, we just assume that we have an area, and the area can be a municipality, barangay, or a province with a certain facility. So the facility has information about the location, which is the latitude and the longitude. And then for each area, we have a population. facilities can either be a warehouse, evacuation center, or a distribution center. So we made sure that the entity relationship diagram is as general as possible to be able to accommodate the different possible applications of the system in the future. Okay, so underlying problem definition and solutions are based from the following set of slides. The first problem that we had is how can we represent the entity relationship diagram into something that models the data. So what we used is a graph representation that is a complete edge weighted graph with vertices denoting the unique area. It could be the barangay, municipality, or the province. And then edges connecting the two areas means that there is a road network going from A to C or C to A. And then the weight associated to the edge is the shortest distance using the road network. Initially, we thought of using the straight line distances from the map because that's easier. However, for a more realistic result, we used the actual road network to identify the edge weights that will be included here in the model of the graph. For simplicity purposes, we doesn't model the graph using a directed graph, but an undirected graph, meaning the path from U to V is similar to V to U. So I guess that's one of the assumptions that we had before moving on. Okay, so for each of the area, we have data about the population. So for example, let's say for area A, we have 10, B, we have 20, 30, and 15. It can act as a vertex weight for the data or for the graph. So the relief distribution has a naive solution. In fact, we can just deliver all supplies to each of the vertices using the total number of required supplies based from the population. However, it's not that efficient if we have size that is very large. So if we have different areas if we have n equal to a very large number, but if we have a small size n, of course we can use the naive solution. But how can we further improve this naive solution? Probably we can select just a few. So the first problem that we wanted to solve is how to select a designated relief warehouses. So we modeled the problem by just stating the input and output. So this is the informal definition. Input is a complete edge weighted graph, and the output is a subset of those vertices. As I showed a while ago, a subset of the vertices such that all vertices in W are accessible from the rest of the vertices in a very fast manner, and then the distances from W to the rest of the vertices is minimized. So we actually have formalization of that definition, and we have the relief warehouse selection problem as stated here. Okay, so this is a variant of the facility location problem, and we just limit the conditions to accommodate the constraints of identifying a relief warehouse. Okay. So we provided an efficient algorithm, meaning this algorithm runs in polynomial time, and the algorithm is as follows. So the first step is to compute the minimum spanning tree of the graph. And then later on, step 2, we compute for the minimum vertex cover of the tree. And the minimum vertex cover of the tree is the selected warehouse of the given graph. So for example, if we have the same graph as I showed a while ago, if we can get the minimum spanning tree in polynomial time. In fact, to be simple, we can use the Kruskal algorithm to get the minimum spanning tree of G. So here is the minimum spanning tree of G, which is T. So this is a tree with edge weights equal to the minimum possible. And then afterward, for step 2, given the minimum spanning tree of the G, we get the vertex cover of T. So this is one possible minimum vertex cover. This is another minimum possible vertex cover. The identified vertices here are the highlighted vertex. So for example, we can select B and D as the selected warehouse, or we can select A and C as the selected warehouse. And then A and C, which are not the selected warehouse, can go to B or go to the nearest selected warehouse. So the next question is, how many supplies will be delivered to the relief warehouses? So since 20 and 15 is not enough for this vertex and this vertex, we need to distribute all the remaining population size to the selected warehouses. And this is by using an iterative algorithm that zeroes out all of the dependent areas, and then the score will be transferred to the nearest selected warehouse. So this is the algorithm that we used. And just to give a short example how to do it, for all the vertices that are not selected, we just get the sum of the current population count for the selected warehouse plus the incident vertex. So the previous vertex node is 20. After doing one iteration, we can have 30 in the next slide. For some of the cases where we have a dependent community connected to 2 possible warehouses, we just uniformly distributed the different we just divided the population to 2, or to the number of connected or incident selected warehouse. So for example, we can zero out this one, and then 15 is added here and added here. So the algorithm will stop if all of the non-selected warehouses are zeros. And as you can see, we have 75 here as the total number of population for all the area. And then we can see that the sum of the population count for the selected warehouse is also equal to the total number of population, which is 75. Okay, so this is just an overview. This is just a screenshot of what we propose as a solution. So since this is an entry for a hackathon for GovHack, and GovHack is in Dubai. So what we did was to use the Dubai dataset to select to use as a test dataset. So the highlighter colored points here are the selected warehouses, and then the gray here is the non-selected warehouses. So instead of just going through all of the points in the graph, we just need to go to the selected warehouses. Okay. And next is, what if we only have a limited number of delivery trucks? How do we assign them to their designated relief warehouses? The easy solution here is to use the local government to distribute all the relief to the selected warehouses. However, we can actually make use of the natural distribution of points. So we just proposed a simple solution which used k-means clustering to provide assignments based from the natural distribution of points. So for example, if we can have k trucks or k ground personnel, we can simply divide the selected warehouses into k, and then for every color, that's the assigned relief warehouses for a particular agent or a delivery truck. So lastly, if there's an assignment already, for the delivery truck to the selected warehouses, we can just simply use the traveling salesman problem as a route optimization to deliver all the goods in from one point to another. So let's say if we have 6 warehouses and we only have 2 trucks using the K-means clustering, for example, this is one part and this is another part. The truck meant for the blue line needs to solve the TSP to deliver all the goods to the designated warehouses and so on. Okay, so we also we also initially we use the two approximation algorithm to solve the TSP. However, we also utilized some of the available API tools such as the Google OR tool. So here's the analysis. So this one is the running time, and this one is the percentage of the error. So the blue line here is the Google OR tool. So it's expected to run in a slower compared to the two approximation algorithm, but the two approximation algorithm is better compared to the route. Sorry. The running time is slow, but the quality of the solution is better. And for the system demo, since this is a GovHack solution entry, I will just show you a video showing what we did for the software. Could you confirm if you can hear the video?
There's no sound.
I'm not sure how to share the sound.
On share screen, there is, I think, an option to share sound.
Yeah.
On share screen.
Wait, let me check.
So share the video first and then share sound using the same button on share screen.
Perhaps on the bottom left.
Yeah. Share screen and then share sound.
I think I need to share screen, window, share.
Share sound. Also on the share screen button.
I can't see the share audio. Anyway, I'll just try to yes.
Jerry, excuse. Go to more.
More.
Yeah.
I only have disable video receiving option. Disable video receiving if I click the more button.
It's not on share screen.
Wala po.
Teka.
You're sharing screen.
Can we try it again? Move to the so play. Is there supposed to be sound?
Baka nakamute.
Naririnig natin, James. Wait,
Ikwento mo lang, Joy.
Select external.
And before you share, yes, tama. Before you share, meron dyan. Bottom left yan eh, bottom left. Ayun si Kyle. Wala si Kyle.
Let me try to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear my video?
There's no sound.
There's no sound. Okay
Yeah.
lang po. Sige. I'll just try to do a quick run.
Yeah, kaya mo yan, Joy. Sabayan mo yung video.
I'll just go to the sample. Okay. So, for example, if you go to the server application, you can actually specify as an administrator, you can specify the region. You can see all of the designated warehouses, both selected and unselected warehouses, and then you can specify, let's say, a source of where the distribution of goods will come, and then you can specify the total number of agents. Okay, so what it will do is to number one select all of the warehouses. And then later on, based from the total number of agents, the routes showing here are the actual TSP routes of how the relief distribution will go through. That is for each of the possible agents or ground personnel. So wala lang audio, but this can also be used for other use cases. So for example, water supply distribution, communication, network, and what else? And in urban planning in general. So I guess I can go to the next slide.
Mute kasi yun. Walang sound.
Ayan po. So, just to summarize, medyo ano lang, sayang hindi nyo narinig yung description. So, lastly, this is the last part of my presentation. I'll be sharing just the summary and some of the future works. As a summary, we provided a system design and implementation that can be used for relief distribution. We provided a simple solution for four problems of for relief warehouse selection, and then number two, resource allocation, delivery of assignments if we have limited ground personnel, and then lastly, route optimization. So it's an end-to-end solution from creating a plan to actual delivery. And then for the future works, we wanted to adjust the design according to more realistic scenario because we had assumptions before it is very simple. So for example, we assume that the delivery trucks has unlimited capacity, but in reality, it has limited capacity. And then we just use the lat long published in NSO, but not actual warehouses, but we can actually use actual location of warehouses and capacity of the warehouses. And then we also we are also looking at possible applications for logistic solutions for rollout of the COVID vaccination, or probably a community pantry location selection problem. So I think that's the last slide. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Joy. I love the work. So as a long-time faculty member, time and again, I've heard students' feedback on their non-appreciation of courses like optimization, algorithms, complexity, because these are difficult courses. So to hear you presenting a work of applications of these algorithms in real-world problems, it's very refreshing. Gusto ko nga dapat makita to ng students, dapat makita ko to ng students. So it's really refreshing. So kung may way na we could share the videos to students, it would be great.
Sure po. I can also share this with the attendees of the conference with audio na.
Actually, while you were presenting, naisip ko nga yung this solution would work for the vaccine distribution because it's similar. So there are limited trucks, there are specific locations, diba? There's a constraint on the delivery of these vaccines to specific locations, right? Tapos recently we also had the problem on hospitals. We have a lot of patients and we have to assign these patients to the most appropriate.
Allocate the patients, yes, to health facilities. Yes po.
Depending
actually,
on
this topic is very timely. This paper was actually written 2018 pa po, and since I was involved in a startup company, and this is still POC for clients, we were not able to publish the paper.
I see.
So, since this is very timely pa.
Now that it's published, magkaka-idea ibang tao. So I wonder how difficult is it to adapt the software to another application. So let's say it's patient to hospital, di ba? What do you
It's
need to do?
Actually, po, the algorithms are very generic, and since we assumed little information as possible, we can assume that the warehouses could be any type of warehouse,
I
for as
see.
long as you know the capacity and the location of the warehouses.
Okay, so the warehouse can actually be a market, tama, or a
Yes
hospital,
po.
ganun siya.
Mhm.
Tapos,
Or a community pantry.
that's right. Tapos yung truck, pwedeng ambulance siya instead of a truck.
Yes po.
Right. Ganda. And then the same, so do you need to specify something in the software to indicate the limitations of the resources?
Initially po, for the resources, we just use the actual population count. But for the actual demand, we can just simply update the information coming in. So there is a necessary phase wherein you need to adjust the software path to get the right type of data and to be able to connect it with other systems that can get real-time data from other sources.
Oo nga, no? Kasi pwedeng may IoT device on the truck para it indicates where it is, tapos kung nabawasan siya.
Yes po. Or sometimes road blockage so that it needs to recompute. So may ways naman right now, but if we have an integrated system that can include this, so ano po, better.
We have a question, Joy, from the Q&A tab from Alex Young. Is that correct that 700 million people die annually from natural disasters? Is that 1/10 of the world's population?
Hello, sir. It's not annually, but in the last 10 years. So that's a cumulative death for 10 years.
I see. Other questions from the group? So if there are none, thank you very much, Joy.
Thank you din po.
Thank you. Share mo sa amin yung video. Thank you, Joy.
Sure po.
So our third paper is from DLSU, Infor, and Orbium Inc., entitled Application of Optical Mark Recognition on Paper-Based Pictorial Pediatric Symptom Checklist in Filipino for Automatic Data Collection. The paper is authored by Judith Ascaraga, Maria Christine Hendrano, Jamie Abigail Pantaleon, Gabriel Amzi Raimundo, Kristen Gaira Ramos, and Gerald Trinidad Jr. Let's welcome Christine Jeng Hendrano to present the paper on behalf of the group. Jeng, you can start sharing your screen and start the presentation. Thank you. Jeng. Wala. May I confirm with the other co-authors if Jeng is here, or who would be the presenter?
Sorry, Miss Charlie, this is Jay,
Jay.
the co-author. Apparently, nag-technical difficulties si Miss Cheng, nag-shutdown yung computer. So what can we do kaya?
We wait for Jeng. Jeng is connecting now.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Suddenly shut down. I'm sorry. Hold on.
It's okay. So while waiting, may I just remind the body, we still have the referendum for the amendments of the CSP Constitution and Bylaws and the election of the 3 new board members. Okay, so I'll post on the chat box the link to the referendum, and for the board members election, registered members of the CSP should have received an email on the electronic ballot. All right, Jeng, ready ka na?
Right. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry about that. My computer suddenly shut down. Okay, for today, I'm going to present our paper. This is an undergraduate research paper entitled Application of Optical Mark Recognition on paper-based pictorial pediatric symptom checklist in Filipino for automatic data collection. This is done by our students Kirsten Guerra A. Ramos, Gabriel Amzi Raimundo, Jeriwel Trinidad Jr., and mentored by Dr. Judith Ascarga, Jamie Abigail Pantaleon, and your student, Maria Christine Hendran. They are now graduates, so they are with Infor and Orbium as mentioned earlier. Okay. So to give you a background of how this research came about, we were involved in a DOST project that incorporates ICT to monitor the general wellness of public school children, specifically grades 1 to 2. This is known as the GB project, which is actually a spin-off of another project, which is the Get Better project by Dr. Arne Escarga, which incorporates ICT to extend access to municipal health centers, since we have shortage of doctors and health professionals. So when we engaged in the project GB, we tried to incorporate not only physical health, but also mental health. In the Philippine setting, we have a not so good ratio of 1 psychiatrist to 250,000 population, which is far from the standard of 1 psychiatrist to 50,000 population. And the mental health professionals and facilities, if any, would not be very accessible, especially in rural areas. So with a mental health professional on board, she proposed that we start with something that's easily disseminated, okay, and that can capture the mental health of children from grades 1 to 2. So the goal of this research is one of the goals actually from the big picture is that to develop a tool that will aid in the automatic data collection of the pictorial pediatric symptom checklist in Filipino, which will help facilitate monitoring of the mental health of public school children. Now, what is the pediatric symptom checklist? Okay, so this is a concise questionnaire which aims to aid mental health professionals in distinguishing children that are in need of psychosocial evaluation. Now, the focus of this checklist would be 6 to 12-year-old children, since there are plenty of stressors and disorders during their school age. So this is when they start mingling with other people aside from their family, and making friends, and maybe enemies. And to guide, to be able to collect the actual data, this is to be completed by parents. Okay? So this is how the checklist looks like. This was developed by Jelinek et al. In 1999. So you have a very concise questionnaire, and it's quite simple. You have complaints of aches and pains, spends more time alone, and then for each of these entries or each of these items, you would have three options: never, sometimes, and often. And as you can see, there are numbers associated with each of these options, which means this would be their score. Okay. Now, there are a total of 35 questions, and once this has been filled up, the scores for each of the corresponding items would be totaled, and those that sum 28 or up would be recommended for evaluation. Just to clarify, the app that was developed only allows for the data collection. The assessment, the further evaluation, is facilitated by another application, which is a web application that is to be used by the mental health professional to probe into or to see who are supposed to be recommended for evaluation, or those that need to be to have another meeting with and some interview. Okay. This is the Filipino version of PSC. Okay, so as you can see from the previous one, complaints of aches and pains, you have dumadaing ng sakit at kirot, madalas gustong nag-iisa, hindi paminsan-minsan, madalas. Okay. Now, this was translated in Filipino by Canseco et al. In 2009. Now, since we are dealing with children, okay, it was a good idea to incorporate the pictorial version of it. Now, this is the Pictorial Pediatric Symptom Checklist, PPSC, in English, which was developed by Liner et al., Liner and Shirsat in 2005. Okay. So as you can see, instead of just seeing the word never, sometimes, or often, these pictures would be easily comprehensible to children. So even if they were the ones looking at the checklist, they can easily relate to how they are feeling. So if they don't complain of aches and pains, they look happy. And sometimes it's just a little bit of this. And then if it's often, you have a lot of the lines emanating from the person. Okay. So all of the 35 questions would have these pictures. Okay. And of course, since we're in the Filipino setting, this was adopted again by Canseco Liego, and he et al. In 2009. All right. So you have nagsasabi na may nararamdaman kirot o sakit sa katawan, and so on. So basically, the Filipino pediatric symptom checklist was used for text of these pictorial pediatric symptom checklist. Now, since we have 35 questions, we have 5 pages, 6 pages of these checklists. Okay, so imagine if you were the mental health professional administering this to, say, a class of 50 students. You would have 50 of these 6 pages, and you would have to be the one to distinguish which ones are the checked boxes, and then what are the corresponding scores. And this cannot be delegated to a clerk or an assistant, except if your assistant is also a mental health professional. One, because it's the main reason being it's very confidential, and secondly, it should not be handled by anyone aside from the mental health professionals. And since we already have a scarcity of mental health professionals, most likely their assistants are not mental health professionals themselves. So the counselors or the psychologists will be the ones who to process this. So we thought maybe there's some way that we can help using ICT solutions. Okay, so instead of the mental health professional checking each and every page and each and every question, and then marking, looking for the marks, and then scoring, and then totaling it up. We try to propose a solution for that. Okay. Now, when we administered the PPSC field, it was piloted to a grade 1 class in one of the public elementary schools in the nearby areas of PLSU in Laguna campus. We invited the parents also, aside from the class to which we would administer this checklist. However, there was a very small turnout, and the advisor and the principal actually told us that that's really their problem. Even during PTAs, there's a very, very small turnout of parents coming to school, mainly because they need to be somewhere else, especially work, or they need to stay at home, taking care of smaller kids. Okay? So it's really very hard to get parents to participate in school activities. Okay. So we had three we had three parents come in, and actually the principal told us, and the advisor told us, that that's actually the average number of parents who would come when there's a school activity. Okay. So to augment this data, the proponents of this research asked parents whose children are not in the class to participate and answer the PPSC field. So these are the friends and titas of our students. So there are two ways in the pilot to the public elementary school. We used two methods to collect the data. One is through the digital checklist, wherein the collection is automatic because all you need to do is answer this the mobile app. So what the mobile app does is it presents the questions one by one, and you have this hindi, minsan, madalas, and it was lifted from the paper checklist that we have. So not by now we already have a better version of the pictures. Okay. In this slide, it doesn't show that it's quite clear, but in the app it is. So anyway, so this is the mobile. This is how the mobile device app looks like. The rest of but when you try to deploy the digital checklist, the problem is that you don't have enough. You might not have enough gadgets. You might not have enough mobile devices. Okay? So in the absence of that, we still go back to the pen and paper method. Okay? And this has always been the fastest way to have a whole class participate, okay? Or a whole set of parents participate at the same time without having the bottleneck of passing the gadget from one parent to another. But as we mentioned earlier, it may be fast when you try to collect them, but when you get the scores and tally the scores, then that's where it becomes very slow. So given this checklist, parents would fill it up, and we would process it through the app that captures the picture. Okay, and this picture of the checklist would be going through image pre-processing, image segmentation, and then optical mark recognition. So this is an example of a paper that was whose picture was which the picture was taken. Okay? And during image pre-processing, when you take the picture, there is a green box that serves as a guide, where the four corners indicated by the four black rectangles would have to be aligned with, so that the significant portion of the checklist would be captured. Okay. Now, during image pre-processing, the undesired distortions are subdued and the important image features are amplified. When you have a picture that was extracted, okay, sorry, this was cut off, but it's supposed to be the whole page. This would now then be converted to its binary image, or the black and white version of which, okay, in order for the segmentation to work, because we need to find these checkboxes, which are the important parts of what needs to be processed. So from capturing the image, okay, we extract the part where it's just the form, and then the form is translated to its binary equivalent, okay, so black and white. Now in image segmentation, we divide the image in parts. So one approach that the proponents did is to do morphological transformation, which extracted the vertical lines as well as the horizontal lines. Okay. The vertical lines and the horizontal lines, when combined, form the contour of the rectangles, which are the points of interest with regards to this particular image. Now, you can see here in the blue lines, now these are all the rectangles that have been extracted. Okay. And given some a priori information regarding the relative location of the checkboxes, the check fields were also detected, those that are in white. Okay. However, for some reason, this failed in detecting the checkbox in the last questions. You can see them here. So what we did was we extracted the question boxes instead. Okay? So that the whole set would then be the segments for processing. Okay, so as you can see here, this is for question 6, 7, and so on. Okay. And now it's ready for optical mark recognition. Okay. This is an electronic method of gathering information from markings on paper forms, which is exactly what we need. We need to detect the check marks from the check boxes and determine what is the answer of that particular respondent, and thus give the equivalent score. So the question box is extracted and the check fields are inspected for white markings. The white markings indicate that there may be a check mark, or maybe some random mark, or maybe a cross mark. So for each check field, the morphological contours are extracted, and given the white marks, which indicate the check or the cross mark, 4 points were extracted: the top left, the top right, the bottom left, and the bottom right. This is for using in Brahmagupta's formula for determining a cyclic quadrilateral. So which the formula is given here. The area is equal to the square root of S minus A times S minus B times S minus C times S minus D, where S is equal to A plus B plus C plus D all over 2, and A, B, C, and D are sides of a rectangle. Applying this formula, we had to reduce the number of pixels, Okay, before we will be able to apply this formula, we have to reduce the number of pixels for each of these check marks or cross marks so that it becomes just a single pixel. Okay, so the thickness would be reduced. Okay, and then the 4 points extracted, and the area of the rectangle is generated using the formula that was presented earlier. Now, this is how it looks like when processing. So we would have the red would be the top left, and then the yellow would be the top right, and so on. However, in cases where there's a small cross mark as opposed to a big check mark, the area of the cross check mark would be smaller than the area of the big check mark. If the marks are relatively the same size, then the assumption that the cross mark would have a bigger area would do and would suffice. Okay. Although in this particular application, the cross marks would most likely be as big as a check mark, because cross marks are usually just to correct, usually used just to correct a mistakenly placed check mark. Okay, but in any case, we tried to address that problem by looking at the trend of white pixel points, okay, and determining whether it's a cross mark is by analyzing the white marks and determining whether the white pixel points are converging and then diverging once again. That would indicate that it is a cross mark. Now, it is good to note at this point that when you collect, when we're able to determine the check marks, then and are classified to the corresponding option or answer, we'll be able to compute the score by totaling the scores for each of the items, and the respondents who scored 28 and more, not just 28 and more, are flagged. Okay? And the flagged respondents are recommended for evaluation. So from our deployment, we had 7 parents or respondents, which are actual data. So they gave their responses based on their experience with their kids, but that would be quite a small data set. So we had to augment by creating synthetic data. So we asked 28 more respondents to do check marks. Okay, so because that's what we need anyway with regards to the data, not necessarily the real answers or the real scores for evaluation. So for the purpose of classifying check marks or cross marks, the synthetic data would do. Okay, now there were 35 check or cross marks for each of these respondents, or maybe more, because if you have a cross mark, then you would have another check mark, okay, because you just corrected a misplaced check mark. And then there are 210 pages that were processed. This is just for 28 respondents. So imagine if this was a real case wherein the mental health professional would be going to a community or a school. Most likely you would have hundreds of respondents, or even thousands if it was a big community. And given that we just have 28 respondents, there were 1,225 question blocks extracted, and 1,367 check fields were marked. Okay. If this was done manually, this is also the same number of check marks or check fields that the mental health professional would have to inspect and see the score for each of these questions. For the classification of check marks and cross marks, we have the following confusion matrix. out of the 1,092 check marks, those that were correctly predicted as checks are 1,013, and wrongly predicted as process 79. And out of the 265 cross marks, 120 were predicted checks and 145 were predicted process. However, there were 10 unclassified marks, okay, so giving us this total. Now, we only have a few cross marks that were processed because, as I mentioned earlier, the cross marks are usually done just for correcting a misplaced check mark. So in conclusion, when you have your digital checklist, it's fast and automatic. However, the limitation is that there might not be enough devices to distribute. The way to augment that is again to do the pen and paper method. Okay, so to apply OMR on the pen and paper method, this can facilitate the speedy collection of data as opposed to the manual encoding of the results. Okay. Based on the classification that was done by our application, the check marks were classified with an accuracy of 93.16%, and the cross marks only at 54.72. So it's not very good with regards to cross marks. However, this still works. The application still works because when we analyzed and we tried to see the responses, mostly check marks were placed. No, so the cross marks were very seldom used, and also maybe this would help because we provided them with pencils, so they can actually erase the mark instead of crossing it out. Okay, so for our recommendation, we would recommend that there should be some improvement on the classification of cross marks, obviously because of a very low accuracy. Okay, and different methods of classification, mark classification, would be used in order to improve the overall performance of the system. Maybe applying machine learning or any other statistical method by which marks can be classified. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jeng, for that very interesting work. I could just imagine how difficult it was to be deploying or conducting a survey involving children.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All the shouting.
Yeah. And I would also think there were some considerations made because we are dealing with children and ethical considerations. Could you share with us some of these?
Oh, before we actually had this particular deployment, we had several meetings with the principal of the school as well as the advisor, and they had to assure that everything would be confidential. And aside from, of course, the informed consent, we presented ourselves to be trustworthy, so that we established a rapport, so that and these public schools, by the way, we've been conducting projects with them ever since, even during the time of Kanlubang. They even referred to the school as, oh, you're from Kanlubang? Yes po, the LSU.
Mm-hmm.
So we already have this friendship, but still we had to ensure that we are going to keep everything confidential and that this is not just for study, and that hopefully in the future we will be able to help them help deploy this to them so that they can actually monitor their kids. It is a very sad fact that when we were interviewing these schools, they said that sometimes even the physical wellness, it's not even monitored, like maybe once a year, and just for one batch. So it's very, very difficult. They don't have a nurse in resident. They don't have a doc, much less a doctor. So they would have to rely on the municipal health center. Okay? And mental health is off the table. They don't have any. No, they have no idea. It's sometimes just depending on the discretion of the advisor, because the advisor would know the kids more, and then they would notice if there's something wrong, but there's no professional to actually help them deal with it.
Yeah. I guess a technological solution or intervention would be appropriate, which, with the lack of human resource.
Yes.
Are there questions from the group? I wonder why the model is more confused with the check marks than with the cross marks
With the
rather
cross
than the
marks.
check. Yeah. Why is it confused with the cross marks?
I think it's because the algorithm that was applied for the cross marks is separate, because the check marks were mainly classified using Brahm Gupta's equation, and maybe it's quite it needs more refinement with regards to cross marks, and the rationale again for not very much focusing on the cross mark is that these were seldom used. Most of the cross marks were from the synthetic data, because we asked them to deliberately do a cross mark. So in the actual data, it's usually a check mark.
I see.
But it would really be good if more improvement for the cross mark would be implemented.
There's a question from the webinar on YouTube from Jasmine Malinaw. Which usual features of the sampled X marks cause the prediction or classification rate to deteriorate, ma'am?
Usually when the cross marks are, hold on, something like this, the one that looks like a check mark, okay? Because the check mark would have to be crossed out. Okay? So these are not an ideal cross mark, but this is how a cross mark would look like in the checklist, because it was a check mark that was crossed out. And so maybe that's why they were misclassified they were wrongly classified as a cross mark.
So there are 4 feature points that are used out, and there are 3 that's being used by the check. Tama ba?
Yes. Because the top left and the top right would coincide with each other.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jeng. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we are halfway through the paper presentations for this morning. Before we go to the 4th paper, I just want to present the certificates for the first three paper presenters. We will be sending these to the, it's not showing. We will be sending these to the authors. Wait lang it's not showing. It's not showing. Okay, so is it showing now? It is. Okay, so the certificate of recognition is awarded to Judith Ascaraga, Christine Henrano, Jamie Abigail Pantaleon, Gabriel MC Raimundo, Kristen Jaira Ramos, and Jeruel Trinidad Jr. for presenting their paper entitled Application of Optical Mark Recognition, or OMR, on Paper-Based Pictorial Pediatric Symptom Checklist in Filipino, or PPSC-PHIL, for automatic data collection during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held this 7th of May, 2021. Signed, PCSC 2021 Congress Chair, Randy Gamboa, and CSP President, Rachel Edita Ramos.
Thank you.
And then earlier, so this is for the second paper, the certificate of recognition is awarded to Joyrene Clemente, Olivia Demetria, Perry Go, Dylan Salcedo, and Jesse James Suarez for presenting their paper entitled Some Optimization Solutions for Relief Distribution during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held this 7th of May, 2021. Signed, Randy Gamboa, Congress Chair, and Rachel Edita Ramos, CSP President. Thank you. And then for the first paper, the certificate of recognition is awarded to Jean Malolos, Pia Regina, Fatima Zamora, Joshua Dizon, Henry Adorna, and Alexander Young for presenting their paper entitled Weighted Protein to Protein Interaction in HER2 Positive Breast Cancer during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held this May 7, 2021. Signed, Randy Gamboa and Rachel Edita Ramos. Thank you to the first three papers. So now we move on to the fourth paper. The fourth paper is from De La Salle University, entitled Extracting and Encoding Story Event Sequences from Diegetic Level Narrative for Next Event Prediction, authored by Winfred Louis Villanueva and Ethel Ong. I'm actually glad that this paper is being presented at PCSC, as I was a member of the panel who evaluated this thesis. Let us all welcome Winfred Villaluna to present the paper.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Winfred. You can now
Okay,
share
let
your
me share my
screen.
screen. Let me know once you're able to see my screen.
We see it. Thank you, Winfred.
Okay, so let me start my presentation by going about the story of Cinderella in a few sentences. To set the stage, there was a girl named Cinderella, and Cinderella was enslaved by her stepmother and her two stepsisters. Cinderella lived like this for quite a while things happened. Then what happened next? Cinderella heard of a ball, then a fairy godmother appears and helped her. Cinderella transformed into a princess-like figure, and more things happen leading up to the loss of her shoe until the prince finds her and dances with her. Then Cinderella lived happily ever after. The end. Now, this is a story handcrafted by humans in the 1900s, arguably, but there's a different version, and nonetheless, it was still made by the human mind. This story follows a tale of a young woman, and we see that every step of the way, something changes. Because these changes happen logically, we have less concern on how did this even happen, and more concern on what happens next. Now, when humans create stories, changes we'll see, have less difficulty in providing less logical input, since we are primarily basing it off what makes sense. The input might not be the most creative one, but still, it can make sense. However, when asking a machine to actually do this, chances are it will have difficulty in providing a sensible answer that you're looking for. So, to pry deeper into this, how sensible can AIs go in continuing a story? What is a sensible story? So, to put it directly, a sensible story means that what happens, or what we call events, form a logical order. To simplify the discussion, let's break this down even further into two different points of interest. So we have events and logical order as our interest. Now, events in the context of this paper will refer to anything that changes the state of the world. That is, there is an action or a verb being executed by an actor or a subject. Additionally, for every event that happens, the expectation is that there is another logical event that happens before and or after it. This will create a chain of events from which the first event happens, or should I say event 1, up until the last event, or in this case, event n. And we can use this to represent the things that are happening in the entire story. But let's say, for example, going back to the story of Cinderella, You want to write a continuation on, let's say, the life of the prince and Cinderella after living happily ever after. It could be about the revenge of the stepsisters, the family building of Cinderella, or whatever you want. Either way, this will definitely be the next set of events to the current chain of event 1 to event n of the original Cinderella. In order to create this next event, we'll have to understand that we are working with the already built event flow from the previous chain. And to hammer point on this idea, we can also apply the same reasoning for the previous events. So the ending of Cinderella is actually coming from all of the other events that happened before it. Now that we have established that this is a basic foundation of what events are happening in the story, let's go back to the original question. How sensible can AI go in understanding and continuing a story? So it depends on one, the ability to properly extract the sequence of events, and two, having the ability to understand and predict events given a sequence of stories. Given these dependencies, the main component of this paper delves on event extraction and next event prediction. So, hello everyone, and good morning. I'm Winfred Villaluna, currently employed as a full-time employee in cloud technologies. Field of interest would include natural language processing and data analytics. Now, with the background and formalities out of the way, let me start with the technical details. So, before we go to event extraction, we need to understand how an event is identified. To reiterate, events can be defined as any action that change the state of the entities in the world. Following the idea of logical order, events can precede or succeed other events via temporal succession or causality relations. Let's say, for example, that the current event, E1, is when Fred said hi. The succeeding casualty relation event is you responded to Winfred. Alternatively, the temporal succession event can be guy A walked into the stage or something. So basically, those are the relationships. But going back to the definition of an event, this can still be grouped into three crucial groups. So in the context of storytelling, the three types of events can exist. That is extradiegetic event levels, metadiegetic level, and the diegetic level. Extradiegetic and metadiegetic focuses on the details of what's happening outside the current world state, while diegetic level events points out to events happening at this point in time. So if we're talking about flashbacks, flash forwards, plannings, these all fall outside the diegetic event level. And if someone is actually narrating the story, this is considered as the extradiegetic level. So diegetic level will contain the data that are important for building the changes in the world. And since we always talk about the current point in building a story, these events will allow us to follow the logical order of events. Thus, the reason why we are primarily focusing on diegetic level. So, in this next slide, I want to highlight the difference between diegetic and non-diegetic event levels. For the diegetic, this includes both the extradiegetic and metadiegetic. So here we can see that the things highlighted in green are those that are happening right now. So things such as fetching a chair, placing things before her, crying, and then saying something, and then finally going upstairs. These are things that are actually happening to Elsie. But if we look at the red ones that explains the context or allows more idea on what's happening, then this simply add to the vividness of the world, but doesn't actually evolve the current state of the world. So if I go into these items that say, but clever Elsie did not come, this actually just tells us more context that she did not do this. But in terms of story building, it doesn't add to any of the changes that are happening. Now, now that we understand the different types of events happening in this story text, we can already work on the event extraction piece. Now, the event extraction methodology utilized a dependency-based approach. This means that I use a dependency-based parse tree to identify the parts of speech of each word and the relationship of one word to the other. Like we've already identified earlier, we will only be using diegetic level events since this give the information we need to document the changes happening in the current world state. Now for the specific steps, utilized in extracting these events. The original solution was developed in 3 iterations, with the first one focusing on subject-centered extraction or less consistent capability and removing the diegetic events. So the steps are as follows. Prior to the extraction, Spacey's parser is utilized to tag the words and identify the part of speech and relationship rule in the sentence. This is done on a sentence level as this was observed to have a more reliable means of parsing. When that's done, the first step of parsing the sentence is to identify and extract the actions in the sentence. Given the natural means that dependency parse trees have the action as the center, it is easier to identify the actors and the objects that are associated with it. While the actors are always mandatory, objects or the direct objects being affected may or may not exist for a given set. Afterwards, we structure this information by creating a vector of the actors, the action done, and the objects mapped to it. Lastly, if there are multiple actions in the vector, they will be split up. So there will be multiple tuples that are created, and these will only have one actor, one action, and one object at a time. If you put your attention to this left side here, we will be able to see multiple sentences with their respective parse trees. So for the first one, when we see that the boy went to the park and he kicked the ball, we can see the 2 actions went and kicked. We can associate the boy here with going to the park. So boy went to park. And for the second one, for he kicked ball, which is boy kicked ball. And for the second one here, we also have since the boy went to the park, the boy kicked the ball and he met with John. The same logic applies where we are associating the boy with going to the park and kicking the ball, and then finally meeting up with John. And in this case, while John is a name of a person, he is a direct object that is being affected by the action met. Since now we are paying attention to the stories in sentence level structures, it is crucial for me to capture difference in the sentence patterns as well. Some of the more major alterations in a sentence pattern will include watching out for different sentence voice patterns, sentence composition patterns, and actor association. While sentence voice and sentence composition already contains the details I would like to explain here, actor association here simply means that if you have a single actor and you have multiple actions being executed by that, we would just want to have the proper association of the said subject to the action that might be dangling when it comes to the parse tree. Now, once that we are able to understand this process, this will be repeated for all of the sentence and the whole story. And once the events are structured, we will be able to move to the sequencing state. Now, for event sequencing, the task is as simple as ordering them in the same way that they were extracted. This was only possible because we are getting the changes that are happening at the current world state at the time of the narrative. Right now, again, we are seeing the diegetic level event take place here, and we can see that each of the items that we are extracting can be taken as is since it's dealing with the current world state. And from there, we just continuously build on top of it. Now that we have the whole solution set in place for the event extraction, how accurate is the solution in capturing the events in a story? To give you a comparison of how this works, let's have a look at an example of the extraction first. So I have here a story that is entitled The Rabbit and the Crow, and this has the entire story at the left side, and at the right side, those that were extracted. Those highlighted in red are those that are falsely extracted, while those highlighted in yellow are the ones that has missing items that more or less includes the object. Now, for those that are not highlighted, they were captured properly. And I would like you to focus on the particular examples in lines 6 to 10. Here, we can see that we are capturing the specific sentences wherein the crow was continuously trying and giving up to some sort of object. In this case, the crow was giving in to despair, while despair is an intangible object. It is being tagged as a direct object, which in the context of this story will make sense. Now, this is the example, and this was actually done for multiple stories across a total of 8 stories. And for us to identify the accuracy, we compare this with the ground truth, which is by manually extracting the events in the story. And again, we are just focusing on the diegetic level events. Now, after extracting the ground truth, we need to compare the results of the machine and the ground truth using the evaluation for precision and recall in order to produce the score called the F1 score. Now, what is precision and recall? So precision here is the focus of the correctness and usefulness of the events, while recall focuses on the completeness of the extraction. While the definitions may be a little close, let me explain more. So precision, when I say correctness or the usefulness, this refers to the extracted events that are actually in the diegetic level. So let's say, for example, we extract something that is related to a plan or a dialogue that is remembering the past. These are events, but this is referring to the non-diegetic level. So these are tagged as incorrect or non-useful. So for precision, we are getting the true hits or the diegetic events over the total of all the events extracted by the system. For recall, on the other hand, this is just a means to measure if we are able to get all of the diegetic level events in a story. So let's say, for example, in the rabbit and the crow example a while ago, the goal for recall is to simply just get all of the diegetic events. But in precision, it is a measure of, on the events that I captured, how many are actually diegetic. Now that we have both scores, we can combine them into a single score, which is the F1. And this will help us determine the overall performance, since this is getting a balance of the score between the precision and recall. Now, on to the evaluation. In terms of the event extraction, we are able to see that we can extract 9 out of every 10 diegetic events existing in a story. But when we are comparing the capability of getting all of the events, 1 in 4 of these events extracted by the system are actually non-diegetic. So for this one, extraction still requires additional rules or special handling for capturing and removing non-diegetic events. But overall, we are seeing a good score of 82% for the system performance. Now that we have the event extraction out of the way, we can now move on to next event prediction. But for us to move to event prediction, we need to make sure that the events that we have extracted is actually sensible to the computer. So how do we do that? The way that we implement this is through the use of word embeddings. So word embeddings operates by converting text into some specific value, and that specific value is closer to the values of other words that has similar meanings. And because of this, similarity rather, and parallelism is possible to make work for this solution. So going a little more specific, the way we implemented the transformation here is by using word embeddings for the action and object elements. But for the actor, I opted to use for a one-hot encoded embedding, and this is sorted by relevance. Now, this means that we have, let's say, for example, a 10 list. And then for that list, we would just say a yes or a no, depending on what character is doing which action. And since we are sorting it by relevance, the expectation is the main character will most likely be in the first or the second spot. The relevance here is gauged by the number of actions that are associated with the said actor. If we go specific into how it actually looks like, we can see here that the standard, the actor action object format, can be transformed into this bunch of numbers that has a vector size of 266 elements. So the actual sizes for this would be the first 10 would be allotted for the actor. The next 128 is allotted for the action. And the last 128 is for the object. Should the object not exist, then all of the values here will simply be all zeros. For this for the actor, on the other hand, we can see here that, for example, we have the character John. So let's say, for example, that there is a story that exists with the main character of John. Since he is the one that has the highest involvement in the story, he will be taking the first place in the one hot encoded vector. So let's say there's also Joe, that is the secondary character. He will take the place of the second place here in the vector, and so on and so forth up until the 10th character. So for this one, only 10 is selected because this should be enough to model the characters in a story. So this is expected to be how an event works, and this will be the same for all of the events that we are extracting. So let's go back to the Cinderella example chain. So if I want to pick up from the happily ever after sequence, it would be the same as saying E event of time plus 1, given the ending that is existing at E of time t up until the beginning, which is E of time 1. So to illustrate that, this is how it should look like. Let's say, for example, Cinderella only has 4 events. So the ending is E of 4. And if we want to continue that, it will be E of 5, which is the result from E of 1, 2, 3, and 4, with E of 4 being the most recent one. Now that we have this idea of a chain, and we want the most recent ones to continuously impact the performance, or rather the result of the prediction, that means we will be having this machine learning model that will take into account the time series data for prediction. This leads us to the usage of a long short-term memory. Now, this long short-term memory is the standard go-to solution for deep learning-based solution that do predictions on this. So going specific here, we have the first layer as the LSTM layer, second layer for batch normalization to avoid vanishing gradients. Third would be the dropout layer to continuously filter out on the results. And the last one would be a softmax layer, which will prep the results into the vector that we needed that is the same format to the input layer I. So the first 10 will be the actor units, the next 128 will be the action, and the last 128 will also be the object. So that is the architecture, and this was trained until no longer validation accuracy decrease is seen, and this has been done for a total of 38 epochs. Unfortunately, at the end of the solution, we only ended up with an accuracy of 31%. And to see how this actually fares out, I have an example of the story being generated here. So the test done was the user and the model take turns having conversation. And here we have the standard scenario of just what's happening inside a normal house scenario. But in this case here, we can see that the user started with character John failing an exam and then having the interaction with the mother and the father. So summarizing this, we can see that there are still replies that have out of context items and those that simply just do repetition of what item has already been said before. Going into a less realistic one and to a more fantasy one, we have here more of a darker side of story wherein some sort of mysterious man is working on a murder, and we can see here that the system is focusing on simply just advancing the movements of this mysterious man, such as breaking into the house, actually going to the guy, and then killing the person, and then leaving the scenario. So we can see here that the results have a good mix of good, neutral, and bad, but this leaves us into a position that we have a 50-50 hit or miss from the system. So the way that we evaluated these results is just manual evaluation. And as I've mentioned, this is a 50-50 hit miss ratio for good output, but we can already see a good sense of capturing common patterns in actor action development present in the previous stories. With that, we can still see issues with providing fitting objects for the actor-action combination. And moving forward, we will still see possible improvements for this machine if we continue to have better training data, given that this is also a limitation that we experience for this. So that's it for me. That is my presentation on extracting and encoding story event sequences from diegetic level narrative for next event prediction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winfred. The floor is now open for questions. I actually have a question. I don't know if I asked this before, but among the relation The relation elements, the three of them, the actor, the action, and the object, which is most difficult to extract and which is the easiest?
So let me go back to the parse tree to be more visual with this. So this is the parse tree that we are following. So right off the bat, the easiest one is the action because that's the one that stands out. And with the nature of the improved iteration, it really does make sense to have the dependency in the action since this is the top and you will
Mhm.
continuously get the objects and or the subjects from below it. Now, what is the hardest to extract would be the object because unlike the subject, you can continuously propagate that. Similar to
Mhm.
the actor association that we have here, we can simply propagate it. But for the objects, understanding if that is actually related here. So in this example, John grabbed and kicked the ball. Having the idea to associate the ball with grab is
Mhm.
a 50-50 scenario. In this example, it applies, but in some other sentence formation, like let's say John went and kicked the ball, so it's not necessarily going to the ball, but it may be going to a specific place that
Mhm.
we don't have explicitly stated in the sentence. So yeah, the hardest one would be the object, the easiest one would be the action.
Mhm. Mhm. And if there's a missing element in the event relation, would it affect the prediction of the next event?
For this one, yes. And it will affect, or ideally, it will have an effect because this is affecting 128 of the
Mhm.
elements that we have for the event. So,
Mhm.
as a standard, the actor and the action is always present, but but the object is a may or may not, which also impacted the final result of the system not being able to properly return objects because most of the scenarios that was captured did not actually have objects previously. So the behavior is that it will most likely not present objects as well, which is yeah.
Mhm. Since there are no questions, ako ulit. Last na to, Fred. Uh, but is there like a limit to how much predictions it can do? So because I could imagine that the first few predictions are better than the succeeding ones. Is that true for this work?
For this one, I could say that there is expected improvements in the results, particularly on the third up until the sixth iterations. Because if I go back to the items that seeing here, it is consistent that the first one or two results that I'm getting is either being upset or expecting something. So this is consistent with the other sample generated story here. So you can see that the first one is upset and the second one is expected. Same with this one. So as to why that is happening, it may be because of sparsity, that we don't have a lot of relations that we can connect to each other. But idea is from after the second one, we are expecting more proper results.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Winfred. Thank you, Winfred. I hope
Thank
you
you.
could still continue to work on this. Or
Yep.
Ethel is continuing the work with some other students. Mm.
Yeah. Thank you.
So on behalf of the organizers, I am presenting to you the certificate of appreciation. So this certificate of recognition is awarded to Winfred Louis Villanuna and Ethel Ong for presenting their paper entitled Extracting and Encoding Story Event Sequences from Diegetic Level Narrative for Next Event Prediction during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held this 7th of May, 2021. Signed Congress Chair Randy Gamboa and CSP President Rachel Rojas. I saw that there's a mistype on the name. We will correct this, Winfred. Thank you again, Winfred.
Thank you.
Mm-mm. So let's proceed to the fifth paper. The fifth paper is from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, entitled The Online Assignment Problem Using Machine Learned Advice. authored by Clarence Casilag, Pollux Ray, and Joyrene Clemente. Let us welcome Clarence Casilag and Pollux Ray to present their paper.
Hello po, nakikita po ba yung slides?
Yes, Pollux.
Okay.
And we can hear you.
Okay po.
You may start.
Good morning, I'm Pollux. Joining with us for this presentation is my research partner, Clarence Casilag, and we are under the supervision of Dr. Joyrene B. Clemente. The title of our undergraduate research paper is Solving the Assignment Problem with Machine Learned Advice. We showed that as the prediction error for the machine learned advice decreases, the solution quality or the competitive ratio of the algorithm for the online assignment problem becomes better. But before we dive deeper to the results and the methodology used to obtain this observation, let us first introduce the concepts needed to understand them. Let's start off with what an assignment problem is. We have here our sets of people and tasks. Each person reveals how long in hours they can finish each task. Assignment problem deals with the question of how to best assign n items to n other items. In this case, we need to assign people to tasks such that the sum of working hours is minimum. Of this problem, wherein all necessary information given from the very beginning is known as the offline assignment problem. In our research, we focus more on its online variant, wherein the elements from one set arrive sequentially, and just like its offline variant, it produces a minimum weight perfect matching. A perfect matching means that for every element in one set, there is one element in another set linked to it. For example, number 1 from set U is linked to letter A from set B. Number 2. Both variants of the problem can be represented as a bipartite graph and a matrix. A bipartite graph has two disjoint non-empty sets U and V, and every edge of the graph connects one vertex in U to one vertex in V. Applications of the online assignment problem include taxi dispatching and crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is the practice of turning to a body of people to obtain needed knowledge, goods, or services, and taxi dispatching is an example of this. We can consider taxis and passengers as two disjoint sets, and the goal is to minimize the number of distance traveled by the car from its original location to where the passenger is. With this, it can also save resources such as time, money, and reduce carbon emission. Since we need to find a solution to a problem, what we need is an algorithm to be able to solve this. These algorithms should be able to obtain an optimal solution in a good amount of time. Presented here are two algorithms for the offline assignment problem. One is from Mancres, which runs at n raised to 4 time, and the other one is from CARP, which runs at n squared log n time. For the online assignment problem, we have bounds for deterministic and randomized algorithms. For the deterministic algorithms, it can already achieve a solution better than 2n minus 1. The competitive ratio is the ratio of the cost incurred by the online algorithm to the cost incurred by the optimal offline algorithm. For the randomized algorithms, Bansal has presented a log squared n competitive algorithm, and showed that no randomized algorithm can have a competitive ratio less than natural logarithm of n. Because of its manner of receiving data, online algorithms perform worse than their offline counterparts, which is why the cost incurred by online algorithm will always be greater than or equal to the cost incurred by the offline algorithm. And the competitive ratio of the online algorithm goes to 1 to positive infinity. The question now is, can we further improve these competitive ratios? If so, how are we going to do this? One way to make the performance of an online algorithm better is to introduce the concept of advice. This can be used to help the online algorithm decide better and boost the performance of the algorithm. An advice contains an information about the future input sequence and is produced by an oracle that knows the future and has unlimited computational power. The problem is, in reality, there is no entity known to have an unlimited computational power and can give predictions 100% correct all the time, which is why we integrated machine learning. We know that machine learning detects subtle patterns and can give good predictions when the error is low. Machine learned advice has helped improve the worst case performance of online algorithms for problems such as key rental problem. Kumar et al. Observed that with predictions, the performance of the algorithm improved even if it is poor. Now that we know the concepts involved for this research, we now ask the question, can the introduction of ML advice to the online assignment problem result to an improved competitive ratio?
Hello. Okay. For our methodology, so basically what we will be doing in this paper is that we will try to do empirical testing in order to find out if this new approach using machine learned advice for our online algorithm for the assignment problem will work. So, parang ganito yung process niya. Algorithm design and analysis, then empirical testing, assessment, and then documentation. So the next slide will show our theoretical framework for our algorithm. So we can see here that we have two matrices, matrix A and matrix A prime. Both of these matrices are of the same size, and then they are separated by a certain distance E, which represents the error between them. So ideally, A prime is a predicted matrix from our machine learning. Our experimentation will assume that the machine learning model will be treated as a black box. So bale, we will assume that A prime will basically just be a matrix that is almost similar to A but is subject to error. So with this, we could change the values of A prime and then by changing the values of E, and then we could use that as parang a machine learning prediction. So with that, we will use the actual input A, and then we will run it, idadaan namin siya with online algorithms, which is introduced earlier, specifically a deterministic algorithm and the randomized algorithm as shown here. We will be using as a benchmark CARP's algorithm, which has a competitive ratio of 2n minus 1, and a randomized algorithm with competitive ratio of log squared N. And then with that, we will also be using the predicted matrix. We will use it. We will use the algorithm to process the predicted matrix, in which we will get a competitive ratio, which we could compare to those parang benchmark algorithms for the online algorithm, and we will compare them in our analysis if this new approach of machine learned advice will do parang improvements to the computation. So in the next slide, it is shown parang ito yung algorithm design namin and pseudocode. It is comprised into three parts. The first one is the one na nakabox, which is, this is the part where we do the machine learning. We assume that there is a certain machine learning model that can give us line per line a prediction similar to A. So every iteration magkakaroon ng isang line which will simulate the arrival of a node dun sa graph with its respective edges to different nodes from the other side ng bipartite graph. And then because this is machine learning, so this would be just predictions based dun sa training on multiple matrices that is similar dun sa parang actual input A. And then the second part is line number 4. Which is from the machine learning model, yung A prime. I think unstable yung connection ko. Okay. So irara namin yung result na matching of irara namin yung A prime with an online algorithm CARP, wherein makukuha namin yung matchings, and then in the third part, which is lines 5 to 8, we will project the matching na nakuha namin from A prime into the actual input A. And then hopefully we can get a better competitive ratio from those benchmarks that I have mentioned earlier. So in the next slide, I will be introducing the benchmark data set that we will be using for this paper. So we will be using a data set by Beasley, the Beasley data set. So this is a data set. This is a data set of varying sizes, specifically sizes of 100 to 800. So with increments of 100, 100, 200, 300 by 300 matrices. And then it also has parang the optimal solution. So it would be represented as a matrix in our computation. So the values of this matrix ranges from 1 to 100, and then the sizes are from 100 to 800. So yeah, so here we will define naman the value of E. So EB is the error with respect to for the Beasley matrix. So we will be using two variables to describe the error. So first is epsilon and the second is mu. So basically epsilon will be the multiplier to obtain the number of perturbed elements in the matrix. So we will assume that the machine learning model will only perturb a definite amount of elements in the matrix, and that would be described by our epsilon. And then next is mu. Mu is a multiplier that can be used to obtain the value of perturbation para doon sa mga perturbed matrices that is from epsilon. So this is also enclosed sa isang function which is the increment function. So the increment function changes the value of the perturbed elements of the matrix. So in the following slide, I will be giving the how we would be using this increment function. So also in our testing, we will be using a set of values for epsilon and mu. For epsilon, we would be using 0.1, 0.2 up to 0.5, which corresponds to 10%, 20%, up to 50% of the elements of the matrix to be perturbed in our machine learning model simulation. And then mu will be a multiplier which will be with the values of 0.1, 0.3, and zero point 0.5. So these values would be used later. So in the next slide, I will also be describing what A prime is. So A prime is basically, as I said earlier, is just A, the actual matrix with perturbed by a certain distance E, which can be computed. So E would be basically be uh, randomizing getting random values of the matrix A and then choosing which values to be perturbed using epsilon, and then multiply all of them with the increment value subject to mu. So parang itong rand function na ito is basically just choosing which values of A will be perturbed. Then in the next slide, the way that we will be describing the increment function is we will scale mu with the maximum value of the matrix. So for our baseline dataset, dahil the values of the dataset ranges from 1 to 100, the max value will be 100. But it would vary depending on the type of matrix that we will be using in maybe different analysis of this algorithm. So in the next slide, so now the thing that we would ask is, ano yung running time of this algorithm? So the first part ng algorithm, this is just isang iteration lang to, but the problem here will be the machine learning model. Hindi natin alam kung, of course, what we wanted to have is good predictions for our algorithm, because as shown in other papers that we have reviewed para dito sa study namin, the lesser the error ng machine learning algorithm, the better the algorithm performs. So it is also known na for a machine learning model to perform better, more training time should be done. So it is something to be parang a trade-off of this algorithm in terms of running time. But the other parts of the algorithm will basically just be running the algorithm with the best offline algorithm, in which for the online assignment problem is n squared log of n. So so the total running time nito will be n squared log of n plus how long the machine learning model will create the predictions for our algorithm. So in the next slide I will be showing an example of how everything will work in a very small matrix para lang we have an idea of what it does. So our example will be a 4x4 matrix with the minimum value being 4 and the maximum value being 99. We set the epsilon to 0.3 and mu to be 0.3. So our perturbation will work as we will first compute how many values will be perturbed using epsilon. So computing that, we get four values will be perturbed as shown in the highlighted elements here. These 4 elements will be perturbed. Also, this is also randomized. So 4 values of the matrix will be perturbed. And then the value of perturbation will be based on the maximum value, which is 99. We basically just multiply the value of mu and 99 to get 29.7, giving us a resulting value of 29.7 as the perturbation value per element. So also another thing that I think I forgot, I missed to explain is that the perturbation will not exceed the bounds of the matrix. So for example, you can see here in the first line of our example, the value chosen is 99. So the algorithm will choose to subtract the increment amount to 69, parang minus 29.7 rounded off will be minus 30 because whenever it will exceed the bounds, it will subtract. Whenever it will exceed 99, it will subtract. When it goes below 4, it will add, and then otherwise it will just do addition or subtraction randomly. So after that, we would obtain the matching from the prediction matrix using CARP, which is a optimal offline algorithm for the assignment problem with O of n squared log n time, in which we could get the matching as shown here, na 1, 2, 2, 4, 3, 1, and 4, 3 for the matrix. And then in the next slide, we will be projecting these matchings to the actual matrix A to get the solution. So to get the solution or the value that we will be using to get the solution quality or the competitive ratio for our algorithm. So it is shown here how it's computed, the algorithm for the optimal algorithm, the cost of our algorithm over the optimal algorithm, which is CARP in our paper. So in this example, we could get, dahil yung nakuha naming competitive cost for this example with using our perturbed matrix is 171, opposed to the optimal solution for the matrix of 169, our competitive ratio will be 1.01. So now, dahil this is a very small data set, it is expected na medyo small lang yung difference, small lang yung competitive ratio niya. But in our empirical analysis, we will be using this algorithm with a larger data set, the Beasley data set with yung 100 to 800 by 800 matrices. And then we will assess them using 3 assessments, which is the competitive ratio versus the value of epsilon, the competitive ratio versus the input size, and then its comparison between the known bounds for the online assignment problem. So we can see here in the graphs, in the next slide, yun. So yeah, here we show how the competitive ratio changes as we change epsilon. So these three graphs are graphs with varying values of mu, in which we can see that this parang reaffirms yung results of other papers, that as the error increases, the solution quality, parang the competitive ratio also increases, thus the quality decreases. So we can see here that each line represents a different size of the matrix. As lumalaki yung size niya, tumataas din yung competitive ratio niya. So everything is parang directly proportional. We can also see na as yung mu increases, you can see in the y-axis, malaki din yung nilalaki ng competitive ratio. So in the first one, where mu is equal to 0.1, 5 lang yung competitive ratio niya when the epsilon is 0.5 on the largest matrix na meron kami in our data set, but it increases to 14 and 25 when mu is equal to 0.5. So this is also parang synonymous dun sa our comparison with the input size in the next slide. So same values din naman yung ginamit namin dito. So same values of mu, where it is just a different perspective, but same result in which as the size of the matrix increases, the competitive ratio also increases. So it is really apparent here na everything, parang all of our variables and the size and mu and epsilon affects the competitive ratio of the problem. But we can see from here that the mu specifically has the most impact in our empirical testing. In the next slide, we show naman how our algorithm compare to the best known online algorithm that exists. So when mu is equal to 0.1, as you can see here, we have outlined the best randomized algorithm. We didn't include the deterministic algorithm because medyo madadwarf niya yung ibang values kasi medyo malaki siya, 2n minus 1. So we included here na lang the bound, the known bound, which is ln of n, and then the best algorithm, which is log of n. So here we can see that when mu is equal to 0.1, on all values, on all other variable values, so any value of epsilon 0 to 0.5 and any value of n, mas optimal yung algorithm namin. But when you increase the value of epsilon, so epsilon is, to refresh lang, is the size ng perturbation value. So siya yung 30. It is scaled by the max value in our case. So when it increases, in this case, in 0.3, when mu is 0.3, our algorithm performs better only when the size of the matrix is 400 and below on an epsilon value of 0.1. So, and then when mu is large enough, it would be better to use an online, the normal online, the classical online algorithm. So, in this case, we can say that ayun nga, it's consistent that a better prediction, a lower error will result to a better competitive ratio and better solution qualities when using advice to hedge our computation. So in the following slide, I will show I will read out our observation. So yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the input size, the number of elements to perturb, and the values of perturbation influence the competitive ratio of the algorithm. And more specifically, they are directly proportional. So as the error increases, the competitive ratio also increases. And then for the Beasley data set, we get the result that the variable that gives the most impact is mu, which is the change per element. So ayun. So that is basically our result, our analysis for our empirical testing. For the future works, we will be working on using the same algorithms in different matrices. In our study, we only used a benchmark matrix, which is the Beasley matrix. It would be better if we could use different values and different sizes for the matrix for our matrix, and then we will perturb it on different definitions of perturbation, so that we could more solidify this claim that that directly proportional sila na when the error decreases for the assignment problem, for the online assignment problem, the solution the competitive ratio also increases. So thank you very much. That's it for us.
Thank you, Pollux and Clarence, for that very interesting work. We have time for one question. Is there a question from the group? Actually, my question, Pollux, I mean Clarence asked my question. I was going to ask how much time was added by the ML advice to the algo. And then you asked it during your presentation. And you also said that the time may be considerable during training, right?
Yes.
But is that time just during the training of the ML algo? So once it's there, the runtime should be constant, right?
Yes po. Kasi what the algorithm does is when the moment that after the ML model creates the prediction for that certain matrix, parang it will just look up the values. Parang may cheat sheet na lang siya
Correct.
when doing the algorithm.
Yeah. So the cost is done before the actual deployment of the algo. And then once the advice is there already, constant na, the time cost would be constant because it's just a lookup on that matrix. So it's not very costly din, kung isipin. Assuming that the algorithm added a lot of things to the competitiveness ratio. Right?
Yes po.
Last question from me. Why did you choose the Beasley dataset? Is there something in the dataset that made you, that's somehow parang bagay siya dito sa algo? Was it a random choice?
Medyo random choice siya, but the best explanation I could say is that siya lang yung data that fits what we wanted to do. First is we hope to create parang a synthetic data set for our testing, but we decided na baka maging biased siya and then it wouldn't make a good parang representation of what we wanted to do. So naghanap na lang kami ng available benchmark dataset that is available for us, and then we found this Beasley dataset na large enough din siya to get good results for our algorithm.
Okay. Thank you, Clarence. So I'll be presenting to you the e-certificate of appreciation. So this certificate of recognition is awarded to Clarence Casilag, Pollux Ray, and Joyrene Clemente for presenting their paper entitled Solving Online Assignment Problem Using Machine Learned Advice during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held this May 7th, 2021. Signed, Randy Gamboa, Congress Chair, and CSP President Rachel Rojas. Thank you again, Clarence and Pollux.
Thank you po.
And Joyrene. Okay, so moving on to our sixth paper. The sixth paper is from the Ateneo de Naga University, entitled Bag of Words and Emoji Predictive, entitled Bag of Words and Emoji Probability Vector Embeddings, an ensemble approach in improving the performance of multilingual sentiment analysis, authored by Kevin Kyle Baldo, Ian Raymond Manaog, Levi John Santa Ana, and John Sixto Santos. Let's welcome Kevin Baldo and Ian Manaog to present their paper. You can see your slides now, but we can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Start, thank you.
Right, good morning. So before we start, thank you for giving us this wonderful opportunity to present our paper. On behalf of our co-authors, two of us will be presenting the paper. So, all right, this morning, we'll be discussing about our research titled Bag of Words and Emoji Probability Vector Embeddings, an ensemble approach in improving the performance of multilingual sentiment analysis. Our research was originally called Project San Tagalog, a sentiment analysis tool for Filipino English tweets, but we changed it to a more appropriate title that actually fits the research project. So right now, in the age of the internet, a number of individuals and organizations have used Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to engage in different activities and topics. These topics can be about a meme someone else shared. It can also be about an update from a friend regarding a new pet they have adopted. It can even be them engaging in conversations and giving feedback about topics, news, and trends shared by a variety of sources. Sentiment analysis, machine learning, microblogs, these are three technological areas that helps improve aspects of human life, be that in business, healthcare, or in education. Services like Awario, Brandwatch, and social searcher are made to classify sentiments of a large amount of data, where manually classifying it will be extremely time-consuming and expensive. So why Filipino English? Well, aside from Filipino being one of our languages, there was a study that attempted to create a classification of emotions from Filipinos' tweets that showed 70% accuracy. But the tweets were in English. The accuracy was used as a baseline for this research. Aside from that, Filipino English currently does not have a wide set of tools for annotated processing, such as specific local dialects that do not have automated translators. That is a major challenge in sentiment analysis that is covered in the research. So why Twitter? Twitter has around 330 million monthly active users as of 2019. 10.4 million are from the Philippines. The number of users, level of activity, and the volume of content publicly available on Twitter provide large data for researchers. There are also a rich number of researches related to sentiment analysis and Twitter, which this research used as reference. Furthermore, Twitter tweets may contain emojis as they have rich emotional information and are used to express and enhance emotion. Since emojis contain important emotional information and that the Filipino English multilingual language have scarce resources, these are areas for the research proposed novel approach to improve multilingual sentiment analysis. We call that novel approach as emoji probability vector embeddings. Aside from our novel approach, the research also proposes different pre-processing approaches alongside the novel approach. These approaches are the EIOU respelling, stemming, and translation. Since we are getting publicly available data from users, we took note of its ethical considerations. This research is exempted from the Data Privacy Act of 2012 and is instead regulated by Twitter privacy policy. So, with that said, we have these two research questions to guide us in our research. Research question number 1. Will using the proposed novel approach EPV embeddings alongside existing feature extraction methods improve model performance in sentiment analysis? Number 2, will using the proposed pre-processing approaches called EIOU respelling, stemming, and translation improve performance in sentiment analysis? Those are the questions that guided us. So as for the methodology, we have two phases. We have what we call the data preparation phase and the experimentation phase. The data preparation phase will be discussed in the next few slides. As for the experimentation phase, the first phase is the framework development phase. This is where researchers developed a framework to automate the multiple experiment tasks. The next one is the experimentation. We experiment with our proposed approaches, which are the EPV embeddings and pre-processing approaches. We have also done 3 experiments: the bag of words, word embeddings, and a combination of bag of words and emoji probability vectors. Each of these experiments will have different variations and parameters, for example, the datasets used. Finally, there is the evaluation. We evaluate the accuracy scores measured from experimentation and use graphs and statistics to verify the effectiveness of our proposed approaches. So for the data preparation, the data involved in this research are collected tweets using the Twitter API. A program that uses the API was made by the researchers and is hosted on GitHub. You may scan the QR code or visit the link to download the program. The procedures and algorithm used for the data collection are detailed in our paper. The search terms used to search for tweets are mostly about topics that were under the Philippines context. Only Filipino English tweets were used, and non-Filipino English tweets or irrelevant tweets were filtered by our volunteer annotators. The algorithm used to get the tweets are stipulated in the paper. As for the search terms that was used to collect the tweets, this word cloud stipulates the search terms used to get the Twitter tweet data. We have set what we call the parent terms to generate further additional related search terms. So as for the annotation or the labeling of the tweets, the researchers gathered 3 volunteer annotators for the dataset creation. They were profiled and were asked for specific credentials to verify their credibility. They are anonymized for privacy, sorry. Their main task is to annotate with the label the tweets collected with the help of a data labeling protocol. The data labeling protocol is a document that contains a set of rules and annotation guidelines that the annotators follow to label or annotate the tweets. They are mainly asked to label each tweet as either positive language, negative language, neutral language, or indeterminate language. Specific rules on when to use these labels are also in the paper. So this is what we call the mock labeling session. Before our volunteer annotators commence the annotating or labeling the actual Twitter datasets, they underwent a series of labeling or annotating sessions that conducts practice runs to increase their interlabeler agreement, and at the same time revise and improve the data labeling protocol based on observations by researchers during the sessions. This trains their ability to identify the correct sentiment for a tweet to prepare them to the actual labeling or annotating of the actual Twitter dataset. In this graph, I would like to note that the first mock labeling session was performed without a data labeling protocol, and the subsequent sessions were performed with the data labeling protocol. Based on the graph on the slide, we can actually see improvements of kappa score per subsequent mock labeling session as stipulated in the graph. That is part of the results section of the paper. Since there are 3 annotators, we can have datasets generated by each annotator. These are datasets A, B, and C, where one annotator is equal to one dataset. All the volunteer annotators label the same tweets. So with those datasets, we can derive 4 different dataset combinations. That's AB, AC, BC, and ABC. As for annotating or labeling the actual Twitter dataset, the researchers developed a web application hosted online as a tool for our volunteer annotators to label the tweets. This app is mobile responsive for annotators who choose to use their phones. This makes it more convenient for our volunteer annotators to label a large amount of tweets as compared to doing the same activity on a spreadsheet. So for our results and discussion, the label distribution per dataset graph visualizes the number of tallies per label or category. I can see that dataset A made by our first annotator is the largest dataset with neutral language labeled tweets having the most tweets. As for the 3 combined datasets, specifically datasets AB, AC, and BC, the dataset AB has the best inter-rater reliability score, making the dataset the most reliable one. However, at the end of the study, it did not consider combination ABC, since the dataset generated was very small and has a very small kappa score. So the subsequent slides will be presented by our next presenter, my partner, and my co-author. So Ian.
Hi, can you hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes, Ian.
Okay. So hello. So I'll be discussing the results we gathered from our experiments. As we can see from the table, these are the average accuracy scores for each model with a corresponding feature extraction method and dataset pair. As you can see from the table, the columns denote the dataset used by the model, and the rows denote the feature extraction method used. So the scores that are colored blue are the baseline scores. We will use these scores as a benchmark to our EPV approaches, to the models that use the EPV. For the EPV scores, the scores that are colored green are model accuracy scores, which shows improvement over at least one of the 2 baseline scores. Those colored red didn't show any improvement compared to the baseline scores. From this table, we can hypothesize that that using bag of words and EPV will show a better model performance compared to the baseline approaches. As a side note, the data set we used in experiments is by default balanced. So accuracy is enough to describe the performance of our models. We used figures to inspect the spread of scores visually. If you would look at the scatter plot on the right, each data point on the graph represents a model's accuracy score. And each colored group in the graphs pertain to models using a specific feature extraction. For example, on the histogram, the blue box pertains to models using bag of words for feature extraction. From the figures that is shown, we can see that the differences of the spread between the groups would reinforce our hypothesis that the models using EPVs would show better performance than the baseline approaches. Now, before we proceed with checking the validity of the improvement in performance when using EPVs, we have to check the distribution of samples, as one of our statistics, t-test, requires a normal distribution in the samples. From the histograms itself, visually inspecting each histogram would show that there is no normal distribution in any of the samples, as a normal distribution would be like a bell shape. It's a Gaussian distribution. So you could also observe that the samples are multimodal. So to further verify that the samples show non-normal distribution, Shapiro-Wilk test is conducted. When using Shapiro-Wilk test, the null hypothesis is that the distribution of the sample is normally distributed. If the p-value that is less than 0.05, then the null hypothesis is rejected. Knowing that, and that all the samples that we've tested through the Shapiro-Wilk test would show a p-value of 0.05, we can assume that the null hypothesis is rejected. Therefore, we can conclude that the samples are show non-normal distribution. So when we have a non-normal distribution of samples, we cannot use t-test. Instead, we use an alternative test, which is the Wilcoxon sign rank test, which can handle non-normal distributed samples. So when using this statistic, if the resulting p-value is less than or equal to 0.05, then the differences between the samples are significant enough to reject the null hypothesis, which the null hypothesis is that two samples are equal. This means that the improvement or deterioration in performance is real and not due to statistical randomness. So from the table shown, we can safely conclude that the EPV log proba and the EPV standardized log proba shows an improvement compared to the baseline approaches, which are the bag of words and word embeddings. Meanwhile, EPV proba may have shown improvement when comparing the accuracy scores. But according to the results of the Wilcoxon sign rank test, this may have happened due to coincidence. Also, by the way, EPV proba outputs the actual probabilities, while log proba extracts the logarithmic value of the probabilities. While with standardized log proba, we scale those log probabilities using standardization. So from this, we can assume that at least two of our variations of our EPV embeddings show a significant improvement compared to the baseline approaches. So next is our other proposed approach, which is the pre-processing approaches. So to identify what is the meaning of the combination notation in this table, we already have stipulated it in the paper, how to read a notation. But for information's sake, I will repeat. I will say it. So in our notation, combination notation, we have 3 digits. On the leftmost side is a digit representing the EIOU respelling. If it's 0, it means it's not used, and if it's 1, it's used. For in the middle digit represents the stemming, and the last digit represents the translation. So same with respelling, 0 means they're not used, and 1 means they're used. From the accuracy results, we can expect that any of the pre-processing did not improve the accuracy, but instead deteriorated it. So we also use the box plot and scatter plot figures to inspect the spread of accuracy scores. It can be observed that some spreads are somewhat similar to the base approach, which is 0, 0, 0, which means none of the proposed pre-processing approaches is applied. This would also add to our hypothesis that the pre-processing approaches deteriorated the performance of models or did not affect the model's performance. So before we verify that hypothesis, we also have to take a look at the distribution of the samples. So the histogram, from the histograms of each sample, we can hypothesize that none of the samples show normal distribution, since none of them show like a bell-like shape for a Gaussian distribution. We then verify that further using the Chaperone-Wilk test. From the results of the test, we can safely assume that none of the samples show normal distribution. So all of them are non-normal distributed. So with the non-normal distributed samples, we have to use Wilcoxon rank test to determine the significance of the change. So from the table itself, we can conclude, since the p-value, to reject the null hypothesis, we need to have a p-value of 0.05, and the null hypothesis means that it's equal or similar to the baseline approach. So from these results itself, we can conclude that almost all pre-processing approaches did not affect model performance. This means that the deterioration that we observed in the accuracy scores table is due to statistical randomness, except for 100, which is respelling only, using respelling only on the models. So since it has a p-value of less than 0.05, this means that the deterioration observed in the accuracy score table is real and not due to coincidence. So from that, our conclusions are EPV embeddings was determined to be a feasible feature extraction method capable of improving the performances of existing models, except for the EPV proba, since we determined that the improvement in performance was due to statistical randomness. And we've also noticed that using a data labeling protocol helped increase the inter-rater reliability between annotators. And if there's a better if annotators are more reliable, this could lead to better data sets. And finally, the proposed pre-processing approaches did not improve model performance, except for 0.01, which actually deteriorated the performance of the models. Finally, the recommendations. For further researches, we would like for the researchers to expand the list of emojis considered in EPV training, because we didn't use all of the available emojis in Twitter. We have like a limited set of emojis to limit our scope. And maybe also try to attempt EPV on other languages, as we so that if we could check that the improvement in performance in English Filipino tweets, sentiment analysis can be replicated in other combinations of language sentiment analysis, like maybe vernacular in the Philippines. Also, finally, attempt using EPV with different existing feature extraction methods. For our research paper, we as stated in the title, we used EPV alongside bag of words feature extraction. So maybe further researchers can expand on that by maybe like using bag of EPV with word embeddings and so on and so forth. That's it for our presentation, and we're now open for questions.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin and Ian, for that very interesting talk. The floor is now open for questions. While we are waiting for the questions to come in, I have a question on the EPV. So, is it part of the word embedding? Did you add emojis and emoticons to the word embedding?
Rather, it's a separate feature space from the word bag of words. Since what happens is we concatenate bag of words with the emoji probability vectors, then use that to train the model.
All right. So your input representation for the tweet would be the first part of the input vector would be the bag of words, and then you concatenate it with the EPV.
Yes.
Ganun siya. I see. So it's not that the emojis and the emoticons are part of the word embeddings.
No.
Okay. So now, yeah, that's clear now. And then your recommendation was to do the same, but this time with word embeddings. So the question is, how do you concatenate or include the EPV vector to the word embedding vector? Tama? That's your recommendation.
Yes, because I haven't, due to lack of time, I wasn't able to do EPV with word embeddings.
Okay. And then for the word embeddings that you used for the benchmark, these are pre-trained, right?
No, sorry, it's not pre-trained. We train it using the input training dataset.
I see. So from the dataset that you have, you created a word embedding for that.
Yes.
And then you use that to represent the input tweets.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies it. Another question, why the choice of EIOU in the pre-processing of the vowels?
It's because we've noticed that it's stipulated in paper, but we've noticed that sometimes, especially in Twitter, like informal communication, they would use two words. They would use a different spelling of the same word, but it would just mean the same. Because we were trying to lessen our what they call this, the dictionary or so. Because since these two words are just the same, why not just put them into one, convert them into one? So that's our motivation for that.
Yeah, but walang A, but EIOU lang.
Well, yeah, from our researching, we haven't seen cases with A though, since they're not similar. IA is somewhat similar, and OU is similar.
I see. So it's more phonetic. The choice is phonetic.
It's more on phonetic.
Okay. Thank you. Since there are no more questions from the team, thank you, Kevin and Ian. So I'm presenting this certificate of recognition to Kevin Calbaldo, Ian Raymond Manaog, Levi John Santa Ana, and John Sixto Santos for presenting their paper entitled Projects in Tagalog, Automated Sentiment Analysis Tool for the Filipino English Tweets during the 21st PCSC held this May 7.
Can we
will.
have the
Okay. Actually, I also stopped when I saw this. We will revise the title as presented today, as you presented today. Signed, Randy Gambo, Congress Chair, and CSP President Rachel Rojas. Again, thank you, Kevin and Ian. I hope you continue to work on NLP since there's very few of us working in that area.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So due to popular demand, may I request all authors, paper presenters, and panelists to stay behind so that we could have a class picture later. And then for some announcements before I close the session, we will resume at 1:30 in the same Zoom meeting. This afternoon, we will have the flash talks for the poster presenters and the awarding of the best paper and the closing ceremonies. Are there other announcements? Doc Rach, you were going to say something earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Chawi. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations.
Randy, are there announcements from the Congress Chair?
Yeah, no more. Ano, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you at 1:30 for the authors, paper presenters, and panelists. Please stay behind. We will have the picture taking. Ayan. Who will take the picture? Randy, ikaw ba? Teka.
Yep.
Okay. On your signal.
Marami pa hindi naka-on eh.
Okay. Pa-on lang ng
Okay na,
video. Yan.
Si Sakalam Henry, please turn on your video now. Henry, si Rowena, Michelle Ann, Ian
And Winfred.
Raymond,
Yeah.
Winfred also. Please turn on your video.
Sandali lang sir at naglilipat ako sa phone ko since sirang webcam ko.
Okay.
Thank you to all the presenters. Congratulations.
Teka, hindi pa. Kulang pa tayo eh. Si Henry, si Rowena, si Michelle, and Ian. Please turn on your camera.
Okay na ako sir. Di ko alam kung nakikita siya or ano.
Alam ko na, dalawa
Wala
ka
eh, no?
Ian. There are two of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bakit nga ba two of you? Paano ba natin gagawin?
I leave ko muna to tuloy itong ano.
Ayan,
itong
I'll change the other one to attendee. Wala, hindi ko matanggal.
Sino yung twins?
Ayan si Rich. Hi, Rich!
Hi, Rich. Social distancing.
Social distancing.
Social distancing daw.
We're done.
Approximately.
We're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Jay.
Dana, Andy? Ay,
Yes. Yeah. See you this afternoon.
See you at 1:30. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. See you later.
See you later.